computer.
It's there.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Dr. Demographics, oh, wait a second, DentalDemographics.com webinar. Now, as you may know, we launched this new site this week, and we're broadcasting these. Now, Mike, do you have the ability to do this on the multiple channels on a Facebook Live and all that? Are you doing that?
I don't, because we didn't go through my system, so we'll have to do that next time.
I don't care. I don't care. Now, I just want to remind everybody, we have DentalDemographics.com is up and running. We're going to be showing this on that, as well as other platforms like on YouTube and Facebook. So
and Scott, not to pat you on the back any more than you deserve, but we also have DentistSiteSelection.com launched, which is your new book that's fantastic, very, very highly reviewed, has both the book and the audio version available. And frankly, the book is for free. They just have to pay shipping.
I think that's pretty wonderful if you ask me. And oh my gosh, what was I thinking to allow this? But yeah, I digress.
While supplies last.
Our reviews, I sent these out to people to have them reviewed. And I'm going to say I kind of made a mistake in that these are not people who are easily impressed. So when they looked at it and said good things, I went, I'm so relieved, my gosh. All right. So that's DentistSiteSelection.com, and we're doing this stuff on DentalDemographics.com. Right, Mike? Do I got that?
That's correct.
All right. Now, today we're going to be talking about Oregon and Washington. Now, the great Northeast, or Northwest, pardon me, the Northwest. Yeah, that's right. Sunsets in the West. And we're going to be talking about some specific numbers. Now, back in the old days, these webinars were almost entirely set up about reviewing locations. We're going to be doing that today a little bit more than we have in the past. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll talk about it. All right, now we go to the slideshow function, playing it from the beginning. Life is good. Now, as you'll notice, DrDemographics.com and DentalDemographics.com is what we're up for. Now, we are now turning up the heat and putting out a lot of content on this new website. This is what everybody has to understand. Every week we're putting new things out. Now, other companies, they may just give you stuff that comes from the U.S. Census Bureau, basically rehashed numbers and maybe a Google search on the dentists. Not us. We're analysts. We're going to help you figure out what all this stuff means. And I think I'm going to put up a video on Facebook today just mentioning a few things about that. So let's go on. Ultimately, here's our belief. Content is king. We're posting podcasts and webinars to the new site. Changes occur weekly, so stay tuned. Get announcements on by following us on Facebook at Dr. Demographics. Guys, I really want you to do this because we post a lot to Facebook, and if you're following us, you'll get the notices. There's no real easy way to do it otherwise. And yeah, we do send things out by email from time to time, but they wind up in your spam and junk folders, and I can't help that. So please go to Facebook, Dr. Demographics, and this should be kind of wonderful for you. We have the winter tours that we're going to be announcing on the DentalDemographics.com. Now, what that is we have a lot of people who are out driving around. They're kind of going, where should we look if we happen to be out there with our significant others, our parents, brothers, sisters, whomever? Well, we want to tell you where to go. So keep your eye on that Facebook page when we start announcing where they are. It's free. We're just going to tell you where we think you ought to go. And they're in several of the states that are growing fastest, so it might be kind of a fun thing for you to do. We still are offering our discount on telephone video conferences. Guys, we are not going to do this very long. So if you are, in fact, the truth is we're contemplating raising the price on the consultation because it's very popular. We're doing a lot more evenings and Saturday consultations. So please check that out. You can see the information on this webpage. Our state briefings, by the way, are a good and inexpensive way to look around. What we do is we publish the demographic data that is current for every city and county within the state that you order. Yeah, I think it's right now $49 to get that information, and we're adding to this, or we added to this, the competition ratios in each of the counties. So it's even a better value than before. And again, that's going to be going up probably in January. So please, if you're interested in learning a little bit about a state, get that briefing. It's an inexpensive way to kind of look around. The book, as Mike mentioned, on www.dentistsiteselection.com, free just for shipping. And we are getting back on our podcast to very specific areas that we're going to be reviewing. Let's talk Oregon. And again, I'm sorry if I'm rushing, but I want to make sure I'm really covering everything. Now, here's the deal. U.S. Census Bureau says there are about 4 million plus people in the state as of 2016, and that's a 6.8% increase from the 2000 census. Here's how you have to figure this. You divide that number by 6%, but by 6, because it's every year. And what you're going to find out is Oregon is more or less growing at about 1% per year. Actually, it's increasing in its rate of growth. In 2014, it was listed as the top moving destination. Means that a lot of people are moving into the state versus moving out, which is odd, and I'll explain to you why. 66.4% moved in, 33.6% moved out. So in other words, big destination state, that may be slowing a little bit. And the reason is because certain policies that Oregon has passed that make it more expensive in terms of, frankly, minimum wage. And so it's not helping the major employment, but it's not the major employers that are going to suffer with a minimum wage increase. It's the small employers. Now, I'll talk about that a little bit. 2 terms I want you to remember about Oregon. One is Californication. No, I'm not making that term up. Californication means Oregon is becoming highly influenced by what's happening in California. One of the reasons for this is a lot of people have realized they're getting hosed in California, particularly Northern California, particularly because of the fires. Now, that Paradise Fire that they had in Northern California was not just in one little area north of Sacramento. It's gone a lot all over the place, and it has spooked a lot of people in the state. Now, because of the tax situation and the unfunded liabilities for California, Oregon is a natural destination for people to head. Now, that is in 2 ways. Not only is it in southern Oregon, where it's an easy jump from the Klamath, but it also in northern Oregon, up by the Washington border. We have a lot of Californians who are moving up there because the employment rate is favorable. The cost of living is much lower, particularly in the Bay Area and even in Southern California, but particularly in the Bay Area in California. So people are saying, I got to get out of here. I'm going to tell you where they're going in a minute. We also have a term called Portlandia. Now, if you haven't seen the show, it's carried on Netflix, and it's just hilarious. And it deals with the politically correct, ultra-liberal lifestyle that often is manifested in Portland. Is it real? Oh yeah, it's real. And that's why I'm saying you're going to have to choose the neighborhood that you go to in Oregon for you to feel culturally accepted. Because one of those things about particularly northern Oregon is there's a little bit of, we don't really want you here. I'll talk about that in a second. Now, this is a map that shows the state, and what you're going to notice right off, the top of the state is defined by the river. If you drive north and south, I-5 is really the primary road, and almost all the population really aligns according to the interstate. Yes, there are people who are living in the interior, but let's be honest, as you get on the other side of the mountains, which happen to run north and south through the middle of the state, it is not as great as you might think. And so the state is primarily very heavily influenced by what's happening on the coast. Now, I shouldn't say the coast, because the coastal area of Oregon, while it is a lovely place, and I truly love it, it's not where the population is to be found. It's mainly on that interstate, so it's inland. So there's a coastal range of mountains that really define this. Yes, there are some rivers that tend to define that as well. If you look at, really, it's Springfield and Eugene north. That's where you begin to see the centers of population. And you might notice the whole state tends to tilt downhill toward the river on the north side. So you have to go through some mountains to get there. If you're ever thinking about a tour of the area, I strongly recommend you take the I-5 and just kind of stop and have lunch and breakfast and dinner or whatever as you travel along. But we're going to talk about the distribution of the population on one side or the other on I-5. Now, let's talk about where there is growth, because ultimately people say, Scott, where should I go in Oregon? Well, the ideal is to look at where there is growth. The population's growth has been increasing very unevenly. Now, parts of Oregon are actually losing population. Those are often the smaller, more eastern-oriented counties. You still can pick up some deals, by the way, and I'm talking about practices that are for sale. But what's ironic is almost everybody wants to go toward the big county, which is, I've never pronounced it right, Multnomah? Multnomah? Leave me alone. I'm old. Anyway, the point is, this is also not only a major population center. The county has over 800,000 people. It's also growing at a reasonable rate. Not spectacularly, but reasonably. Washington County, which is off to the coastal side in northern Oregon, is where, if you were asking me, Scott, where should I really go to seriously look, Washington County's got to be one of those places. And that's because its growth rate is good, but it's, I probably ought to move that screen down a little bit so you can see the median household income. Washington County has more money than the greater Portland area. And that's not an insignificant benefit when the growth rate is this good. Clackamas is not bad in terms of its income, but its population size isn't quite as great, and its growth isn't quite as significant. But Clackamas County is still a very good bet. Now, when we start getting down to these smaller counties, it's a little more dangerous. You look on this chart, you're going to say, hey, I noticed someplace that's really growing, and that's Deschutes County. We'll talk about that in just a minute. That's Lake Oswego area. And there's a good quality of life that's happening, and I'm going to move this little thing over so you can see the money is not insignificant as well for a relatively small county. So if you look at Oregon overall, you say, well, how good is the state? I'd say, well, it's moderately good. It's not spectacular. Now, Deschutes is down in that southern area. If you go to Eugene and then cut right over into the center of the state, that's where that's located. And it's showing very significant growth. And that one reason is because the cost of living is low. Now, when we start talking about how much does it take to live in a place, that is going to affect where you go for your practice. A location that has a favorable cost of living, doesn't cost a lot to put a house in. Houses tend to be lower, practices tend to be lower, but also reimbursement rates are almost always going to be lower. Oregon is not overly spectacular when it comes to the reimbursement rates. It's highly localized. Now, one thing I want you to see on this map. If you look on the north side, you have Portland on one side of the river and Vancouver, Washington on the other. And if you head to the east, you're going to see this happen in several of the river crossings. How good is it to go there? Well, the difference between property tax and income tax has made the differences between these states very significant. So for that reason, a lot of people have chosen to live on one side and work on the other side, and that makes a big difference. Now, I'm not going to go into all those very specific sites. I'll just say, get the data on the state briefing on Oregon will really tell you a lot about that. But it's also going to tell you why within each of the cities there's significant growth and where the money is. That's why you get that state briefing data. And it's available on our website at drdemographics.com under the state briefings. So please take a look at it. Now, this is where Washington County is relative to Portland. And you can tell it's on the other side of a little river. But if you look at where most of the growth has been going and where I kind of consider the future of Oregon is going, I kind of look at Washington County. So if you look at Cornelius, Hillsborough, even Aloha and Cedar Hills, Beaverton, those are some really good places to kind of look around. So let's say you're going to be out in the area and you're driving around. Yeah, I love the tour of Portland, and I've done that many times, but really this is the area that I want you to look for. It's going to show not only the places that you can do startups potentially, but also their practices for sale. And also this is where, for those young associates you're looking, a lot of opportunities that are coming up. But of course, Portland and its surrounding communities are also going to have a lot of employment opportunities. So let's move on to the cities. You can tell that Portland is kind of the big dog with about 643,000 people plus. It's growing reasonably well, and it has money. Now, the other thing you ought to know, Portland also has some poverty pockets. So when I say you really have to do a little demographic research, it's making sure that the practice that you're considering going to or buying or whatever is not in the center of one of those poverty pockets. The bad news about that is it's not going to change anytime very soon, and that's a problem. So now going on, Salem, Eugene, and Gresham are also fairly large, but I want you to notice one thing about the projected, the historic growth. Remember, you have to divide that number by 6 in this case. And that's really going to tell you more about what the annual growth rate for each of them. You'll notice Bend, by the way, has got a lot of growth compared to everybody else, a reasonable income at 68.5. The little thing to keep in mind, though, when you're looking at that is everybody else in the world kind of thought, we ought to go to Bend. And the competition ratio within this area is not insignificant. Now, it's not just that Bend is the city to be careful of. There are places around Bend that have opportunities as well. And that's going to be generally true of any of these locations. Oregon is not known for its great downtowns. It's really for the peripheral communities. That's where your opportunities are going to lie. So please take a look at those. You'll notice, by the way, that Tigard is also growing. I don't want to say it's spectacular, but it was surprised me when I started looking at the numbers behind the numbers. And again, it's not a small town, and it has a reasonable household income. If you look at Lake Oswego, by the way, as I mentioned earlier on, it's got a median household income of $112,000. For a population of this size, that's not bad, but it's also growing reasonably well. Do I expect that the median household income is going to increase? Not a lot. Do I think that the growth rate is going to increase? I think it will. So it has to be on your radar to look at this as another site to go to. Now, let me just keep going on because I don't want you to be bored. Just hate it when people get bored. Now, let's talk Washington for a second. And I'm going to have to move our little video thing over here. Mike, I'm sorry about that. Well, in fact, I'll tell you what. I'm going to see if I can minimize that. There, that's better.
We can see your whole screen, so it doesn't, if you make a change on yours, it doesn't really affect what we're seeing.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Mike. You're
welcome.
All right, now let's talk Washington State. The population has really grown quite well since the 2010 census. But that growth is almost entirely along the coast, and I mean greater Seattle. We'll talk about that specifically. It's 13th overall in population, and was the 3rd most populous after California and Texas west of the Mississippi. So a lot of people are going, oh, I want to look at other places. There are other states that are growing this year faster than Washington, like Idaho. It's remarkably good, and Arizona could surpass it as well. But it is still continuing to surprise people, demographers, by how fast it's growing. It's one of the 7 states that do not levy a personal income tax. I was surprised. The state does not collect a corporate income tax or franchise tax either. So far, that's good. But Washington's got a funny idea, and this is particularly for the area around Seattle. They've got a big homeless problem, and they decided to come up with a really clever idea. We're going to have a business premium tax. And so Amazon and the other big employers there went, I don't think so. We are not going to go along with it. And they threatened to move, or to move many of their operations out of the state. You know that Amazon has opened up big plants, or will be opening them, in Northern Virginia, basically in the D.C. area, and also in New York, in just across the river from New York City. Now, here's the reason that this is a big deal. It's given them leverage over the state of Washington. And all of a sudden, the state of Washington went, we were just kidding about that tax. Well, they did the same thing to Boeing, incidentally. They were claiming that they were going to charge a huge amount to Boeing, and then Boeing said, oh, not a problem, we're moving. Not all of our operations, but we're moving enough. And it became kind of a big issue. So it's the intent of a lot of the government people to figure taxes are going to save them. I'm kind of wondering if that's going to be the case. Washington State base sales tax is 6.5%, which may sound like a lot, but when you consider it in relation to California, a lot of people are going, hey, I'll go to Washington anytime in order to do that. Now, as you can tell, Washington's got two sides, and the Cascades run north and south. In other words, the whole state sort of goes downhill into the river. Seattle is the big dog, but it's not Seattle that you really have to consider as an opportunity. You look at towns like Sammamish and Bellevue, Everett, and even Tacoma, Federal Way, and other locations that are on the outside of Seattle. The reason is Seattle is crazy expensive, not only for homes, but for business properties especially. So when I was looking at lease rates, it got crazy. And I'm going to tell you that's a real problem. Now, a lot of people are looking at two areas in Washington as alternatives to places to go. Well, I said three. One is Olympia. The other is Bellingham. Or Bremerton, which is across the bay, if you will. A third side I keep coming up against is Bellingham. Now, if you talk about larger towns that are showing some growth, and even growth that hasn't been recorded yet but is likely, those are areas you have to consider. Now, everybody's going, yeah, but what about Spokane? What about Yakima? If we're talking about the problem with a $15 an hour wage that Washington has kind of imposed, that's where the real struggle is going to be. And one of the reasons why Idaho has been growing so well is because Washington is going to start bleeding businesses and middle class, lower middle class people, not out of the greater Seattle area, but out of the eastern state. So a lot of people are saying, look, I can move 10 miles. I'm all of a sudden on Idaho, or I can live there. I'm out of the tax situation. It is going to become a serious problem for Washington. Now, if we talk about King County, it's grown and grown and grown significantly. The growth rate is high. It's probably the second highest in the state at about 13.65%. It also has a very high median household income. The reason for that is you can get a job there as a shoe shine person and you are going to make a lot of money. So that's not an insignificant reason to go there. You might also note, incidentally, that Franklin County is showing some of the highest growth rates in the state. It has a reasonably high income, but one of the reasons Franklin's growing is because it isn't the most expensive place to live. That's why people are kind of considering that as an opportunity of where to go. Again, don't want to run out of time. I'm sorry. So King County, as you can see, is the big dog. A lot of people don't recognize that King County actually goes a lot further east than a lot of people think. They sort of look at the greater Seattle area and they think that everything is the 405 and the 5 freeways. I'm not saying that that's generally not true, but if you were to say to me, Scott, where should I really consider doing a startup, or where should I consider going that might have a good practice purchase that's going to have more opportunity? I would tend to look at places like Maplewood, Kennydale, Sammamish, Redmond, Kirtland. You see, it's not that the big businesses are not there. They are, but they're also setting up more dense population housing. I mean, they're putting people into little cracker box places, and that's one reason why people are moving there. They're looking at very hellacious commutes, however. That's going to be a problem for dentists. Now, other little thing I got to tell you. The state is going to be facing a problem as people get a little older who are working in those high-tech jobs. They've already had some pretty bad work things over at Amazon because the younger people are saying, we are being underpaid and overworked and screw this. And if alternatives open up within Washington, they'll move. And that is going to affect dentistry. The other thing is dentists have to have very high lease rates, and that's going to be a problem. Franklin County, by the way, as you can tell, is off to the east side of the state. That's where Richland or Richland's not in it, but it's right near it. Pasco, Kennewick, those locations are really at the southern part of the county where a lot of the opportunities are coming. There's also some military facilities here, and I think that's also going to have a mitigating factor on the region. I'm sorry I'm going so fast, but that's kind of the nature of it. Seattle, Spokane. Well, all right. Spokane's big. I worry about it. Tacoma is moderately big. I wish it were growing more. But if you look at Seattle and Bellevue and Everett and Kent, these are the cities that I was mentioning that are showing a lot of growth. In particular, Bellevue has a remarkably high income and cost of living. Kirtland, by the way, very high income, as does also Sammamish. Now, it's not as though money is going to be your salvation. It really means that the cost of housing is going to be higher. But it also means that your reimbursement rates are going to be high and your competition is going to be higher. So when people ask me, should I go here? I say, let's look at the neighborhood that you're going to be in to determine if there's a reasonable population per dentist ratio. Reasonable is going to be right around 1,400 dentists per population, daytime population, not residential. Quick note, daytime population really is everybody that works and lives in the place combined. And what the ratio is between the people who work there and live there is kind of a big deal, particularly in Washington. So when we're doing your statistics, that's what you have to know. All right, now, quick little note. You'll notice that there are other companies out there that do a lot of demographic work. What they're giving to you is basically rehashed from the U.S. Census and does not come with any projections, and it doesn't come with any analysis. Guys, at Dr. Demographics and DentalDemographics.com, analysis is what we do. Right, Mike?
That is correct, sir.
All right, now, two quick things. We are offering the book at DentistSiteSelection.com, but we also have for this month the video conference discount. It's $50 off. Guys, it's not going to be repeated. You enter DEC18 to get that. But please do not delay because we're only offering a very limited number of these. So it's a little bit first come, first serve, and you're the first to really hear this. So, Mike, have I missed anything? No,
I was just going to say, just really emphasize that it's always been a telephone consultation. This is actually video. We conference you in, and if you have a site selection question, this is real-time information, real-time analysis. I can guarantee you that nobody else in the industry can match anywhere near the data and what the data actually means when it comes to site selection with Scott. If you have a marketing question, if you have something that you're struggling with, if you want some opinions, do you want some guidance, some help, that is my expertise. That's where I'm at. So you can get a video conference scheduled with Scott for a $50 discount. You can do a marketing consultation with me for the $50 discount, and you'll indicate it on the form. But this is a huge discount because it's not an extremely expensive product to start with. And so take advantage of this. Make sure that you're set up for 2019. This is the guidance that you need.
Okay, let me tell you something that Mike does that nobody seems to know. He is the best person to tell you how much to spend on your ads. A lot of people do Facebook ads, for example, for their dental practice, and they're going, oh, Facebook ads, and they're giving you all kinds of stuff. Not only does Mike know how to do it, he knows how much to spend.
Absolutely.
And by the way, he's tracking the cost efficiency on these things, makes those people a little crazy, but Mike is a fantastic resource on knowing not only where to advertise, but what to do.
This
report we do, it's a remarkable tool.
This is the other thing, though, to really, that I will tell you when you're getting hosed.
Yeah.
And a lot of you out there are getting hosed by your current marketer, and it's a travesty. And so I've got enough experience that I can look at what you're spending, and I can tell you really specifically if you're overspending and if you're getting hosed or not. So,
but it's a flat fee report that we do for the marketing report.
Yep.
Take a look at it, but it's also a flat fee telephone consult for a set period of time, very low price.
Right.
So what you can save on this is kind of remarkable. I'm sorry, I know I sound like Crazy Eddie who's trying to sell electronics. I don't do that anymore. Anyway, I want to thank everybody. Tell your friends and neighbors about us. We'll be here next week, and we look forward to talking to you.
With hopefully a special guest next week.
Okay. Let me just say this real quick because this is going to help. Guys, I know this may sound weird, but dental practice brokers are the guys who live in the area and kick the tires on practices all day long. They are a great resource to me, and we're a great resource to them. So some of those guys who are using our services and also are doing a really good job, we're going to start having them on as guests. I got a guy from the Midwest, a guy from Florida. I have one of the most remarkable people from California. And these are people who know what they're doing. Next week, we may have a special guest. We'll talk a little. I won't tell you until he confirms with us. But anyway, it's kind of good stuff. And rather than think that we're going to shill for him, I may ask them some very hard questions. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. And we'll talk to you again next week. Take care.